Three countries just crossed the threshold into high-income status in 2024: Bulgaria, Palau, and Russia. You'd think that's cause for celebration, but here's the uncomfortable truth. Getting there was never the hardest part. Staying there is what actually matters. And right now, nations we've always considered wealthy: Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, France, are hitting economic walls that weren't supposed to exist. In fact, by the end of 2024, about 1 in every 4 developing countries remained poorer than they were before COVID hit in 2019. Even more troubling, roughly 40% of low-income countries still haven't recovered their pre-pandemic prosperity. Meanwhile, advanced economies that once seemed bulletproof are now grappling with stagnant growth, bloated debt, and a future that looks far less promising than their past. This isn't just an economic blip. It's a fundamental shift in how prosperity works in the modern world. And it's happening so gradually, so quietly, that most people haven't noticed just how serious the problem has become. So what's going wrong? Why are countries that seem rich on paper struggling to maintain momentum? The answers are more interconnected and more alarming than you might expect. Let's start with the elephant in the room: debt. Not just government debt, though that's certainly part of the story. We're talking about total debt, public and private combined, reaching levels that would have seemed unthinkable just 2 decades ago. In 2020, public debt as a percentage of GDP in advanced economies surpassed 100% for the first time since World War II. Japan leads this dubious race with a staggering debt to GDP ratio approaching 400% when you include private sector obligations. Even traditionally prudent nations like Germany and the Netherlands are feeling the squeeze. Here's why this matters more now than ever before. When interest rates were effectively zero or even negative during much of the 2010s, carrying massive debt seemed manageable. Governments could refinance obligations cheaply. Businesses could borrow to invest. Consumers could spend on credit without crushing monthly payments. But those days are over. As of mid-2024, a substantial wave of government bonds needed to be refinanced at significantly higher rates. In the United States alone, close to 33% of marketable Treasury securities, about $8.1 trillion, matured before the end of 2024, requiring refinancing at rates several percentage points higher than the original loans. For countries across Europe and Asia, the situation is remarkably similar. That means billions, sometimes trillions of dollars that could have gone toward infrastructure, education, or healthcare are now consumed by interest payments. The correlation between debt levels and currency weakness tells another part of this story. Research examining major economies from 2019 to 2024 found a striking negative correlation of -0.75 between total debt to GDP ratios and currency performance. Translation: the more debt a country carries, the weaker its currency tends to become over time. This isn't just academic theory. It's reshaping global financial flows and determining which nations can afford the imports they need to maintain their standard of living. But debt is only one dimension of the crisis. There's another demographic time bomb ticking beneath the surface of wealthy nations, and it's already starting to detonate. Populations in developed economies are aging at a pace that would have shocked policymakers even 30 years ago. The old age dependency ratio, the number of people aged 65 and over per 100 people of working age, has more than doubled in OECD countries between 1960 and 2022. Japan sits at the extreme end, with a median age that will reach 55 by 2050, making it the oldest territory in the world. Even younger European nations are watching their workforce shrink while the ranks of retirees swell. This isn't just about having more elderly people. It's about the crushing fiscal burden that demographic shift creates. As individuals reach retirement age, their reliance on state-provided pensions, healthcare benefits, and Social Security multiplies. According to analysis from the OECD, aging pressures could increase the public debt burden by an average of 180% of GDP in G20 advanced economies over the next 30 years if governments don't implement policy changes. Think about that for a moment. Nations already drowning in debt could see their obligations nearly triple simply because they have too many retirees and not enough workers paying taxes. The problem compounds itself. As research from 24 OECD economies reveals, fiscal policy becomes increasingly ineffective in economies with aging populations, regardless of debt levels. When governments try to stimulate growth through spending in aged societies, the money doesn't produce the same economic multiplier effect it once did. Younger populations tend to spend stimulus money, driving consumption and business investment. Older populations save more and consume less, blunting the impact of fiscal intervention. It's like pushing harder on the gas pedal, only to realize you're barely accelerating. Europe faces this challenge with particular urgency. The European Union's new fiscal rules require countries to anticipate and offset the fiscal costs of aging during their adjustment periods beginning in 2025. That means nations must run sufficiently high structural primary balances, the difference between non-cyclical revenue and non-interest spending, to keep debt ratios under control. For many European countries, this translates to front-loaded austerity measures precisely when their economies can least afford them. France's economic growth is expected to slow to just 0.7% in 2025, according to the Banque de France, before barely recovering to 1.1% by 2027. Germany, Europe's traditional economic powerhouse, experienced 2 consecutive years of economic contraction in 2023 and 2024. A stunning reversal for a nation that once seemed invincible. And then there's the productivity puzzle, perhaps the most confounding piece of this crisis. Since the mid-2000s, labor productivity growth has slowed dramatically across advanced economies. This isn't a short-term blip caused by the financial crisis or the pandemic. It's a long-term structural decline that predates both disasters. In the United States, labor productivity grew at successively lower rates from 2002 through 2006, well before the housing market collapsed. European nations saw similar patterns. Even as technology advanced and artificial intelligence promised revolutionary breakthroughs, the actual measured productivity of workers stagnated. The mystery deepens when you look at where this slowdown is happening. Research analyzing OECD member countries discovered a growing productivity divergence between frontier firms, the most innovative, efficient companies in each industry, and everyone else. Frontier firms in manufacturing saw productivity increases of 2.8% per year, on average between 2001 and 2013. The laggards managed only 0.6% annually. In the services sector, the gap was even more dramatic. Frontier firms achieved 3.6% annual productivity growth, while non-frontier firms crawled along at 0.4%. The best keep getting better, the rest are falling further behind, and that gap is dragging down entire economies. Several theories attempt to explain this productivity stagnation. One provocative argument suggests that the information and communication technology revolution may have sown the seeds of its own demise. Initially, digital technologies allowed high productivity firms to expand rapidly into new markets and product lines. But eventually, expanding meant competing with other highly efficient, high-markup companies. The expected profits from innovation fell because the most attractive opportunities had already been seized. New entrants faced higher barriers to entry, especially when competing against established firms with massive intangible assets like software platforms that scale effortlessly. Innovation became harder, more expensive, and less rewarding. Another explanation points to the fundamental nature of modern economies. Advanced nations have shifted dramatically from manufacturing to services over the past several decades. American households spent $8.3 trillion on services in 2023, more than double their expenditure on goods. Services sector work is inherently more resistant to automation and efficiency gains. You can't speed up a haircut the way you can optimize a factory assembly line. Healthcare, education, and hospitality sectors that now employ nearly a quarter of the U.S. workforce showed average annual productivity growth ranging from negative 0.6% to essentially zero over a recent 10-year period. As more workers move into these naturally low productivity sectors, overall economic productivity drags downward, even if manufacturing continues improving. The slowdown in total factor productivity, the measure of how efficiently an economy combines labor and capital to produce output, is particularly concerning. Studies suggest that ideas are literally getting harder to find. Research productivity has declined steadily across semiconductors, agriculture, medicine, and other fields. Maintaining even constant rates of progress now requires exponentially more researchers and vastly greater investment. The number of researchers in the United States has increased by a factor of 23 since 1930, yet the pace of innovation hasn't accelerated proportionally. We're running faster just to stay in the same place. Global trade is adding to these headwinds rather than alleviating them. International trade growth weakened to just 0.6% in 2023, barely a pulse compared to the robust expansion of previous decades. Several factors explain this decline. Consumer spending has shifted from goods to services, which are less tradable internationally. Geopolitical tensions have disrupted supply chains and encouraged nations to reshoot critical manufacturing capabilities. The rise of protectionist policies has led to a revaluation of global supply chains. Countries imposed about 3,200 new restrictions on trade in 2022, and roughly 3,000 more in 2023, compared to about 1,100 inches 2019. This fragmentation hits developing economies particularly hard, since they often rely heavily on exports for growth. But it also diminishes the efficiency gains that wealthy nations had come to depend on. Perhaps most troubling is what experts call the middle income trap, which now affects 108 countries according to the World Bank's 2024 analysis. This concept describes economies that grow to middle income status through investment in cheap labor, but then stall before reaching high income levels. They get stuck between low-wage competitors and high innovation leaders, unable to compete effectively with either. What makes this relevant to wealthy nations? Because the same dynamics are starting to appear in countries we thought had permanently escaped such concerns. Climbing to high income status is becoming harder everywhere due to high debt loads, aging populations in both developed and developing economies, and growing protectionism that limits opportunities for economic integration. Even nations that achieved prosperity decades ago are finding it increasingly difficult to maintain their position. Current projections suggest the global economy will grow by just 2.4% in 2025, down from 2.9% in 2024 and well below the pre-pandemic average of 3.2% from 2010 to 2019. Advanced economies are expected to grow at only 1.2% in recent forecasts. Without a major course correction, experts warn the 2020s will be remembered as a decade of wasted opportunity, a period when wealthy nations failed to address structural challenges and allowed their economic foundations to erode. The human cost of this quiet struggle reveals itself in public opinion. A 2024 survey across 34 nations found that people in most European countries offer negative evaluations of their economies, including 3/4 or more in France, Greece, Italy, and the United Kingdom. Even where growth statistics look relatively acceptable on paper, ordinary citizens report feeling economically insecure and pessimistic about the future. A median of 54% of adults across surveyed nations identified the gap between rich and poor as a very big problem, with another 30% calling it moderately big. The path forward isn't obvious, and that's part of what makes this situation so challenging. Traditional tools that policymakers relied on for decades are losing their effectiveness. Monetary policy faces constraints from high debt loads and aging demographics. Fiscal stimulus runs into the hard reality of already bloated budgets and skeptical bond market. Some economists argue that aggressive labor market reforms could help policies that encourage higher workforce participation rates, keep older workers employed longer, and attract skilled immigration. But these reforms are politically difficult. Raising retirement ages angers voters. Immigration remains controversial. Reforming rigid labor markets encounters fierce opposition from unions and established workers. Investment in public services and infrastructure offers another potential avenue, though, again, constrained by fiscal realities. Analysis indicates that if the U.S. public sector could have its estimated efficiency gap with similar private sector functions, productivity would rise by 5 to 15%, generating annual savings between $100 billion and $300 billion. Similar inefficiencies plague healthcare, education, and public administration across wealthy nations. Addressing these would require sustained political will and substantial upfront investment, precisely when budgets are already strained. The reality facing rich countries in 2025 is that prosperity isn't permanent. Economic success requires constant adaptation, innovation, and difficult choices. Nations that became wealthy in the 20th century did so under circumstances that no longer exist and face challenges their predecessors never imagined. An aging population that needs ever more expensive healthcare and generous pensions. Debt levels that constrain policy options. productivity growth that has mysteriously stalled despite apparent technological progress, trade networks that have become more fragmented rather than more integrated. All of these forces are converging to create what one World Bank economist described as a future where countries risk remaining stuck at their current income levels for multiple generations if growth rates don't improve. This isn't inevitable. Countries can escape these traps through smart policies, institutional reforms, and strategic investments. But it requires acknowledging the depth of the problem first. Too many political leaders and citizens in wealthy nations still operate on the assumption that prosperity is their birthright, that being rich today somehow guarantees being rich tomorrow. History suggests otherwise. Economic leadership changes hands. Nations rise and fall. The question isn't whether these struggles are happening. The evidence is overwhelming that they are. The question is whether rich countries will recognize the challenge in time to respond effectively, or whether they'll continue quietly struggling until the decline becomes impossible to ignore. For millions of families in countries we've always considered wealthy, that choice may determine whether their children inherit opportunity or disappointment. Do you think wealthy nations can turn this around, or are we watching the slow decline of economic dominance? Share your thoughts below. And if this analysis opened your eyes, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We're tracking the economic forces reshaping our world.